Surrey paying the price in bullets and in blood.
I always question why I didn't fall for that lifestyle. Um, to be honest, sometimes I think I just got lucky.
Two teenagers are dead after a shooting in Surrey. The young men were just 16 and 17 years old.
I think I was always scared to disappoint my parents because you think of how hard they've had to work, and they still have to work really hard for this lifestyle.
We've lost our son. He had a bright future. And now we're left with nothing.
Media coverage of Surrey, British Columbia describes a community in crisis. But that's not the whole picture. People here don't deny there are struggles, but they know there's so much more to this place and its citizens. I'm Ramnik Johal. I was born and raised right here in Surrey. I've seen how full of hope, community, and togetherness this place can be. I've also seen the looks. I've heard the comments. I get that feeling when people find out that I'm from Surrey. To them, this is a terrifying place. To me, it's home. To show the complexity of this community, my community, I followed two families. Just like me, they're trying to make sense of what we see as a beautiful place. I'll introduce you to people you might not expect to meet, and we'll talk about the challenges members of the South Asian community face. I'm hoping by the end, those stereotypes you have stuck in your head will be replaced by the facts. Constable Arjun Johal was born and raised in Surrey. He says understanding the Surrey dynamic isn't that easy.
It is complicated because there's kids I grew up with who we kind of knew were going to go down this path, but there's also kids who are the top of their class, who are great with everyone, who also still fall under this.
When he says this, he's talking about a life of crime. As a person from Surrey and as a police officer, he knows the reality behind the statistics.
It's very confusing here in the Lower Mainland, where you have people who come from, like I said, good homes, rich families, who are still getting involved with this, who are very intelligent in school, who have great athletic skills, who are still getting tied up in there. So it doesn't make any sense for us. It's so much harder to solve.
I've also seen some of the kids we went to school with become high-achieving doctors, lawyers, all-star athletes. There were some who got into drugs, but others finished school at the top of their class and never looked back.
It's weird to think, because of the kids I used to hang out with, to see where they're at compared to where you and I are at. So I always question why I didn't fall for that lifestyle. I'm just very thankful that I am where I am. When you have like other countries where you have people who come from low income families, at least there's somewhere you can start to help them out. Whereas us, it's you can fall off the rails at any moment. Coming from a good family, having your whole life ready for you, but even then, you can, with a snap of a finger, you're involved in this lifestyle.
What kind of reputation do you think Surrey has in the media?
I have friends who live outside of Surrey, and they have very negative expectations of Surrey. And when they see people like you and I, they're very shocked. Mm-hmm. But it's actually a norm here. There are actually very successful kids. They all have been to school and they have good jobs. But the media doesn't represent that. I think the media only represents the gangbangers you see who are getting shot.
As a journalist and someone who's lived here my whole life, I've wondered that myself. How so many of the headlines only tell one side of Surrey's story. Here's a sampling of local media headlines. When it comes to Surrey gang life, family looms large. That's from Global News. Here's another from the Surrey Now Leader. Surrey's anti-gang unit targets 10-year-olds amid middle-class gang problems. Middle-class gang problems. I see that one a lot. The unusual suspects. How BC's middle-class gangs are unlike any other in North America, says another one from CBC. Domestic silence. Parents of Surrey gangsters won't speak up. These are the kinds of characterizations we see and hear all the time. But here are the facts. When it comes to crime, Surrey ranks 85th nationally, well below Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, even below sleepy BC towns like Victoria, Kamloops, and Cranbrook. But this doesn't mean there still aren't troubling stories coming out of Surrey that weigh on the entire community. There is still gang activity that so many of us are aware of, and that is the kind of detail that Arjun's grandparents might have worried about. Arjun's grandparents, who played a huge role in raising him, admit that some kids in Surrey do venture down the path of drug dealing and crime. Arjun's grandfather, Dilbag, says those cases reflect poorly on the entire community.
ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਨਾ ਯੰਗ ਉਮਰੇ ਡਰੱਗਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਸ ਲਈ ਹਾਰਡ ਆ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਬਦਨਾਮ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ
Here he's saying the young kids that end up going into drugs, it's hard for their parents. It's hard for the community. The community ends up becoming notorious. In Surrey, this idea of community means so much more than shared location. Community here is about shared experience, shared language, immigration, work. In Punjabi, we use the word apne to refer to those who share the same ethnic background. Apne, it translates to ours. So for those in this community, hearing these stories isn't about someone else. It's about one of us, one of our own. Arjun's grandmother Darsho says parents make sacrifices to raise their kids. When she hears about gangs and young ones dying, it breaks her heart.
ਇੰਨਾ ਔਖੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੱਡੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਚਾਂਸ ਹੋਵੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਔਖਾ ਹੈ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਲਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਚਾਹੇ ਕੁੜੀ ਹੈ ਚਾਹੇ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਇਟਸ ਹਾਰਡ ਬਹੁਤ ਔਖਾ ਹੈ
To translate, Darsho says parents take on so much difficulty and struggles just to raise their kids. When this happens, it's so hard for their parents. It stays in your heart, boy or girl. It's hard to hear things like that. For me and many of my friends, the struggles our parents endured are ever present. They came, they worked 2 jobs, they learned a new language, they tried to give us a chance at a better life. Many of us work hard to make them proud, to try to make their sacrifices worth it. When I look around Surrey, I see a lot of evidence of that. Arjun says that it was his parents that made him want to stay out of trouble.
Where I'm at in life right now, my parents are very proud and they love telling other people about it. So it means everything to them.
How did that affect you? What decisions did you make to be sure that you stayed on the right path?
We all hear the story of I came to this country with only $100 and it's hard to imagine. I mean, I could never imagine how that could have happened, but because we haven't lived that, and the traditional way of getting to gangs is usually because you're coming from low-income families and you don't have the family ties, so that's why you go into the gangs. Whereas us, a lot of these gangsters in the lower mainland are coming from good homes, $1 million houses with nice cars, but even then they're still intrigued to go into that lifestyle. So there's kind of that, we don't really have that appreciation, well, not for me to say, but for some of these guys, they don't really have that appreciation of how hard their parents have worked to get this far. They don't see the struggles that they've been through, and they just see a nice house. They say is not as bad as our grandparents complained it to be.
Ranjit came to Canada from India when she was 7. She said she didn't really pay attention to the stories until she had her own kids.
Growing up as that, I didn't really pay much attention. But I think as the community grew, our perception of everything changed a little bit. Like we were more in the media, with the gangs. It always seems to be our community. Maybe we're paying more attention to it because it is our community, right? But it does seem to be like every time somebody gets shot, my worst fear when I'm listening to the news, is it going to be an East Indian? Is it going to be a brown guy? It just breaks your heart. It is when they're so young, when you hear about as I said, 13, 14 years old, and they're getting shot. Why? What have we as parents not been able to give them that they need to go out and do that? That's what scares me.
Ranjit says that for immigrants of her generation, many parents would leave their kids to be raised with their grandparents. They did that in order to be able to work and provide. She says, though, that her mother-in-law might not have questioned kids' behavior the same way a parent would.
With my generation, it was all about work. It was about, okay, I got to go to work. I got to buy my house. I got to have this, have that. We gave our children to our parents who didn't live the same lifestyle that I choose to live. The girls can say, Bibi, I'm going over here. She's not going to question them. The children aren't being questioned. I think that's the difference.
She thinks this might be one of the roots of the problem, inequality between boys and girls. In her view, girls are questioned more than boys, so they sometimes start to behave differently. Arjun's grandpa Dilbag agrees. He sees many brown boys getting involved with gangs, and he thinks direct, Honest communication could help families keep those kids on the right path. For him, it all starts at home.
It's on the media. It's mostly the boys. 9 out of 10 it's mostly the boys. And from what I see is the girls are being raised, you can't do this, you can't go out, you can't. But if you're a boy, because I grew up with it with my brother, he was allowed to go out anytime he wanted to go out, join any sport he wanted to join. I couldn't do any of that. So it was like, no, you're a girl, you have to stay home. So it's questioning your boys. Okay, where are you going? No, you can't do that. And not being afraid. And I think that's what the problem with a lot of parents, they're afraid.
ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟ੍ਰੇਨਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਘਰ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਹੋਣੀ ਆ ਫਰੋਮ ਦ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਸ ਜੇ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਸ ਕੋਈ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹਾਈਡ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਟਰਾਈ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਨਾ ਜੇ ਹੁਣ ਨਿਆਣਾ ਅੱਜ ਲਕਸ਼ਰੀ ਕਾਰ ਚਲਾਉਂਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਇਹ ਕੰਮ ਤਾਂ ਕਰਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਸੇ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆਏ ਆ ਰਾਈਟ ਅਸੀਂ ਡੈਫੀਨਿਟਲੀ ਸਸਪੀਸ਼ੀਅਸ ਹੋਣਾ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਚ ਕਰਨਾ ਕੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਹਾਈਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਕੋਈ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਡੈਫੀਨਿਟਲੀ ਰੋਂਗ ਹੈ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਸ ਲਈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਯੰਗ ਉਮਰ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਉਦੋਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਪਰ ਇਹਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਿਜ਼ਲਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਬੈਡ ਨਿਕਲਦਾ ਮਗਰੋਂ
The Bog said this type of training can only start at home, from the parents, especially if kids are trying to hide something. Parents really need to watch their children, where they are going, what they are doing, where they work. If they're hiding something, it's definitely bad for the parents, and they are going to go down the wrong path, because it often happens from a young age. Parents wouldn't know, but the result is always bad after. People hide things. They really need to not hide it.
I want to show a perfect life. That's what I find is that in our community, we don't want to show our weaknesses. We don't want to, oh, my kid's not successful, my kid's not this.
It's hard to maintain that perfect image when other images of Surrey dominate the headlines. But Arjun sees himself as a start. He says when community members see him in uniform, their ideas start to change.
Funny enough, just seeing my face in a police department changes how people feel about brown guys in Surrey. Just today I had an uncle, an East Indian man, come into work and he was so thrilled to see a young brown Indian boy working behind the lines of a police department. And we had a long conversation today. It was really good and he was really proud to see me there. And I asked about his kid too, and he's working at a bank. So, I mean, we're not all gangsters, right?
Arjun became a police officer because he wanted to help. He is grateful to his grandparents and the community that raised him.
I decided to volunteer for the community police station in Delta because I thought, oh, that'd be pretty interesting. So I started there, and it's only then I realized that I really like policing. So that's kind of the avenue I took. It feels amazing to be able to help others, especially from my own community. Being from the community, it's easier to understand the life that they live and what they go through on a day-to-day basis. So it's just easier to understand what's going on and come to resolutions as to how I can solve a problem.
Arjun's desire to give back can only just begin to scratch the surface of the long-standing stereotypes about this community. Stereotypes that often follow people from Surrey anytime they leave.
People always joke about Surrey. They're like, do I need a passport to get there? And do I have to wear a bulletproof vest?
That's Pamela Sangha, Ranjit's 31-year-old daughter. She works as a registered clinical counselor in Surrey. She understands the frustration about Surrey's image, but she says it's also time for the community to take on some of its own issues.
I had a friend of mine who was an addict, and the system was set up for him to fail, and it was kind of astonishing. And then I realized that in our community, we don't have these conversations. We kind of bury those people with addiction, and we just don't talk about it. The reason that our culture is so embedded in addiction is because no one recognizes immigrant trauma. And then no one knows how to have that conversation because everybody that came here left their hometown, never saw it again, didn't speak to their parents for years, like didn't know what was going to happen, and just buried that and went to work.
Immigrant trauma. That's something Pamela says we don't take seriously enough. She works with people to deal with trauma of leaving friends, family, and life in their home country. Arriving to try to learn a new language and provide for your family, and then try to adjust the expectations to the community around you. People don't tend to talk about it because talking about it can be perceived as vulnerability.
Because you're supposed to come here and be successful. The whole point was to live this Canadian dream. So how dare you be ungrateful or think that you're allowed to be upset when you get to live in the most beautiful place in the world? What gives you the audacity?
Immigrant success is a big source of pride in Surrey. In my own family, there's so much focus on my parents' journey and what it took for them to give me this life. We rarely talk about the challenges, the hard parts. That's what Pamela focuses on. She's able to have conversations about things that most people want to avoid.
I'm a counselor and I get to have these conversations with our community because it is so confidential. Like, I'm not allowed to say anything, and that gets signed off. So I talk to women and I talk to men and I talk to people from our community upwards to the age of like 77 who understand now that the way they're feeling isn't normal and the things that they went through need to be discussed. So I think that's kind of a great way to start, because vulnerability is very difficult, and we're kind of in this weird era, especially with Instagram, where no one wants to tell you about their shit. It's just all highlight reel, which is kind of, I think, the lives that Indian people are living in general.
Pamela sees what's going on in Surrey as a family crisis. She's hopeful because the parents she meets want to be involved in the solution.
It's a family problem, 110%. It's not the kid who's like joining the gang that has the issue. It's obviously the lack of support around that. So they make an assumption on the news that this is like parents aren't concerned about their kids being in gangs. So they had a forum at Tamanoas after those kids got shot, and every single parent showed up. There was 500 people that showed up to have this discussion. Not people, parents. For people in the news to be like, oh, this is a lack of parenting, or this is a lack of this, or this is a lack of that. That's not what's happening here. Surrey has a demographically family systemic issue.
The family crisis grows and creates a ripple effect. Because while parents are hard at work trying to provide a life for their kids, the collectivist culture that so many in this community are used to begins to get broken down.
What's happening is Surrey got very expensive to live in very quickly. With that comes a lot of crime. It's just systemic. Everyone's got to go to work in order to survive here. It's like, why don't you make it affordable for people to live here and for people to spend time with their families? Because we're collectivist culture. That kind of mentality where you're not being raised by your grandparents or you're not at home with parents or family all the time turns us more individualistic, which is not a space that we're comfortable in because we come from collectivist nature.
We're talking about the collective, but we're also talking about a specific demographic, young men. I wanted to get a better sense of what it's like to be a guy growing up inside the stereotype. Jaskita Mander is 15. He's a high school student in Surrey.
I feel like kids and their parents don't really connect nowadays. There's a huge gap. Parents are usually isolated from their kids, and the kids are always doing their own things, and it gives them more chances to do dumb stuff with their friends. But then if you're just at home or you're at a youth center just playing with your dad or with your mom and just having fun, then you tend to stay out of the bad stuff.
My family has been really good in that way. They know to keep me out of that life, and they've given me warnings, and they've kept me on a good path so that I wouldn't go into that lifestyle.
Jaskita is lucky. He understands that he has a choice, and he has a support network around him. Not all boys in Surrey are so lucky. They might not have people around them to help manage the line between right and wrong.
A haircut does a lot. The short hair, the bangs at the front, all black clothes mostly, like baggy clothes with the sweats and a hoodie. I feel like most people think that brown kids my age are mostly like gangsters, like drug dealers, and it's just the way that we dress. They just assume that we are like that.
I think they immediately assume that I'm some kind of jack or I'm just another like brown boy that dresses up like a wannabe gangster or something. That's not really true.
I'll admit, I've thought about that Surrey Jack stereotype. So many kids dress and act a certain way here, almost as though they're emulating drug dealers, tough guys, and gangbangers. But meeting Jaskita turned that on its head for me.
A lot of people have told me that I should change my hairstyle or change the way I dress, but I don't really care. I dress the way I like to dress, and I get my hair cut the way I like to look. Don't really care about what people say about my appearance, and I just do what I feel is good for me and what I like to do. I think it's just easy for them to just group us like that. Just automatically think that just because they look like that, they are like gangsters. I don't really know the kids because a lot of kids act a certain way, but actually aren't like that.
What do you think people assume when they see someone like that?
I think that's just the picture that they have in their head when they think of the term a Surrey Jack. They just think of like a guy with short hair, earrings on, and like all black clothes, and that's just what they see when they think of that term. I think there has been some people that have given guys like us that kind of reputation, that have done dumb stuff. Then people think that like all the brown guys are like that. You can't just assume that just because of one or two people that everybody is the same way.
But as a young person, there's so much pressure to figure out who you are. What's your identity? What does it mean to be a brown boy from Surrey?
Mostly in our families, boys are known to have to act tough. To be a man, we can't really be soft. We have to act tough in front of everybody. When most of your friends or a lot of people are doing something, they will usually say, be a man, or like, do this. If you don't do this, you're a girl. It kind of forces you into thinking that I want to be a man, I want to be cool.
Arjun understands that. So does his grandma. Young men face a lot of pressure.
ਜਦੋਂ ਨਿਆਣੇ grow up ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ 12 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੁੜੀ ਹੈ ਚਾਹੇ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਾਲੇ ਕੌਣ ਆ ਕੀ ਆ ਸੈਲਫ ਸਟੀਮ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਇਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਫਰੈਂਡ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਉਦੋਂ ਨੂੰ ਖਿੱਚ ਲੈਂਦਾ ਕਈ ਕਮਜ਼ੋਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਡਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਛੇਤੀ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਚਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਕੰਫੀਡੈਂਸ ਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਘਟ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਇਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੰਮਾਂ 'ਚ
She says when kids are growing up, from 10 to 12 years old, they don't know who they are. They have low self-esteem. If they make a bad friend, they get pulled into that. Some people get scared, so they fall deeper. Those who have confidence in themselves, though, are less likely to fall into these things.
Other kids I know, their grandparents don't speak English and they only speak Punjabi, so they easily manipulate them and they tell them lies as to what they're doing and where they are. And the grandparents will believe that, so they'll believe that they're just at the library when really they're hanging out with the round crowd. So it would be harder for me to do that as a kid because my grandparents are very involved with my life and they wanted me to come out good. So I got lucky in that sense.
Whether you're lucky like Arjun or whether you're someone who's figuring things out like Jaskirat, everyone who lives in Surrey has a story. Sometimes, though, the pressures that surround young brown boys in Surrey tend to hit a little bit too close to home.
I was at school one day and we walked to 7-Eleven to get Slurpees and two random guys just came up to us and asked me if I wanted to make money and like sell drugs and stuff like that, and I said no.
At the time I was pretty scared because I was still younger. I was in grade 8, so I felt scared, and then right when I went home I talked to my sister about it, and then I just told her what happened, and then she told me stuff like that does happen, but you just gotta make sure you're smart and you say no because it's not all about making money. That's what they use. They asked me if I wanted to make money first and I said no because I already knew what they were gonna ask me after, but then that's how they get kids into it.
I talked to Jaskirat about Jesse Bangle and Jason Juti, two high school kids who were shot and killed. They were boys his age, and they were in the news, dying so violently.
It's a community in grief and shock as investigators try to solve the targeted shooting that left the two teenagers dead. They have been identified as 16-year-old Jaskaran Singh Chuti, known as Jason, and 17-year-old Jaskaran Singh Bangal, Jazzy, as his friends call him.
It was actually really weird because the place it happened, it was near my old house, and I used to actually play at that same basketball court where it all started. So it was just weird. And like I actually knew a lot of their friends, and I went to elementary school with a lot of their friends that they went to high school with. I feel like it's important not to make bad decisions that could affect your life in the future, because one small disagreement or fight could lead to something bigger. It all goes down from one bad decision and it can all ruin your life. You just have to think about your future and not just having fun in the moment, because you could mess up when you're young and then ruin it for your future. So just like thinking about the consequences that could come with your actions.
There are so many stories in the media about young South Asian boys, kids close to Jaskirat's age. It's hard for him and us to make sense of it.
It's just weird because the choices that they make don't only affect their lives, but it affects so many other people around them. Most of them come from good families with money, so there's no really need for them to go and sell drugs and get caught up in that lifestyle.
When I asked Jaskirat what stories of the community stand out to him, he brought up Brandon Bassi. Brandon was 19. He was from Delta, and he tragically died in a car accident last year. He was an all-star athlete, a student, a son, and most importantly, a really good guy.
He was really good at soccer. He was a really nice guy, and he sadly died in a car accident last year. and a lot of people were affected by it. Like, not even just like people that were close to him. I would never met him, but I was close to his brother, and just going to his memorial and hearing all the good stuff that people had to say about him, there's nothing negative about him. All the things that were said were like, he was such a nice guy, he always had a smile on his face, people respected him. So it just comes back to that thing where it was about respect and how much respect people had for Brandon. Boys do look up to people like that, and then they want to be like that. You don't want to be the next kid in the news that got shot, but you want to be the guy that everybody's talking about, who's like on the news, talked about in like a positive way.
Jaskirat himself says he too hopes to give back to the youth of Surrey one day.
I want to open my own business. I want to open my own restaurant and then make some money, and then eventually just open a youth center once I have enough money and I'm financially stable, be able to do something to give back to the community. My one friend from my soccer team, him and his dad take me to their Muslim youth center, and it's really cool. They go there, they chill out, they have like a basketball court, there's soccer nets, there's a volleyball net, and it's just a nice place for Muslim kids to go and just hang out with their parents. And I feel like we need something like that for the Indian kids, so that would just be a really cool place for them to go and just play and just like be themselves. I see other guys that have come back and are doing their own stuff and have their own businesses, and how much respect that they get. And at the end of the day, respect is like the best thing you can have from somebody.
Pamela's mom, Ranjit, agrees. The core of the community should not be forgotten.
The things that our community does do well. To me, what my understanding of our community is, our thing is seva. We serve the community. Anytime you ask somebody to do something for you, we will not say no. We will figure out a way to do it to help somebody else. In our circle of family and friends, if I need help with something, I know they're there to help me no matter what. Even if it's difficult for them, they're going to stand beside me. And I think that's what our community in a whole, whether they want to or not, they will stand beside you. I might not speak to a certain person for years, but if I phone them up and say, hey, listen, I need your help, they're going to come. And I think that's part of our community ethics.
What she means by community ethics is this desire to be there for one another. People come together to help and give something back. Her own daughter is proof of that. Pamela works at Moving Forward Family Services in Surrey that offers pay-what-you-can services as well as discounted rates on regular counseling.
Moving Forward has interns. They provide counseling and one-on-one counseling and groups and support at low cost or free. So sessions are usually from $20 to $50, when normally to see a registered clinical counselor, it's like $120 and over. But they have interns and they provide all of the support, and we're busy. It takes like 2 to 6 weeks to see a counselor just because there's such a need for this low-cost platform. So we do provide group support, which is what I do. I facilitate group for women. We have a men's group. We have social workers that will help you fill out paperwork if you need help filling out paperwork. And then you get to see, so I'm a registered clinical counselor, so you get to see me at a low cost, $50, which is amazing.
Pamela works directly with women. She tries to create a space to talk about their issues. That's a rare thing. South Asian women tend to look after everyone. I know how immigrant mothers like my own carry so much responsibility and expectations.
I facilitate a women's group every Monday night, and there's like 5 to 8 women there, and they're all older than my mom, actually. And they come and they talk, and they're concerned about their kids, and they're concerned about life here. I mostly deal with Indo-Canadian women, and a lot of them have been abused in their relationships, or a lot of them had arranged marriages, and their husband is fine, but they're not in love, and they had kids, and they just did this thing, and they don't know how to cope with that in regards to their mental health, because it's like, I can't get out of this now, I'm in it, which is so interesting because our generation gets divorced. We're afforded that kind of privilege. I think it's really important to start empowering those women. And I do it like one-on-one in sessions, but just having that conversation, the fact that a woman can sit on my couch and tell me, hey, my marriage sucks. I didn't want to marry this person. I did this because it was expected of me, and now I'm stuck here and I'm miserable. How do we fix it? I think that's really important. Just starting that conversation.
I wanted to dig a little deeper with Pamela about this logic in the community. What is behind men continuing to think they have power over and can control women? These conversations inevitably led to Maple Battaglia. She was 19. She was murdered, brutally, after leaving her partner. It's a familiar scenario, and it breaks my heart. It also scares me. I don't understand why it keeps happening.
As women, we need to start loving ourselves more and realizing that we don't need to cater to somebody else to be validated and fill this void. But also we need to start having this conversation with men, because it's just getting worse on that side. I don't know when this culture changed from, yeah, we're going to control women and abuse them, to now we're going to act like they're disposable. Because that's just hurt, culminating hurt on top of hurt. That's all that is. So somewhere along the way, there was a disconnect. But I think what it fundamentally comes down to is what happened.
As the mother of 3 girls, Ranjit says how children are treated from the beginning matters, and until everyone in the community values boys and girls the same, nothing will change.
When my second one was born, my aunt came to see me in the hospital. And I was fine. Like, I didn't care one way or the other. Actually, even before that, I just had her. A lady that knew my grandmother was in the hospital or visiting somebody, and she got into the elevator as they were taking me up to my room. And she goes, "Oh, Rano, what did you have?" I said, "I have a baby girl." She goes, "Oh, it's okay." And I was just like looking at her like, why would you say something like that? And that evening, my aunt came to visit, and she was hesitant to come and see me. And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Well, every time I come to the hospital, and because her daughter-in-law's had girls, they're all crying. Why aren't you crying?" And I said, "Why should I be crying?" She goes, "Because every time I come and see them, they're crying that they had girls." And I said, "She's perfectly fine. She's healthy. And, like, there's no reason to cry." And I don't understand why. My biggest pet peeve is, as a woman, I'm degrading my own self when I'm saying, "Oh God, I had a girl." How can you possibly do that? So I really don't know how to change that mentality unless, with me. I think it's up to us to raise our girls to be leaders. It's not, oh, the man can do anything and you can't as a girl. It's up to us as individuals, not up to the community, not up to anybody else, but, as parents, it's up to us.
It's up to all of us. These honest conversations, like the ones I had, are the ones we all need to have. It's certainly what Pamela believes.
I think that if we start really talking about what we need with our families, then as a result, we will develop healthier patterns. I think that's all it is. It's like, this is not a conversation that's being had. And if you're not being nurtured and supported in the way that you need, all it is retaliation. Like, your inner child hasn't been fed somewhere along the way. And so now it's like, what, I gotta fill this void with something. Why are we so hurt? Let's start having that conversation.
That was the idea for this project. To have the conversation. To talk about it. This place is complicated and there's so much going on. There's a lot of hope and promise, along with lots of hurt and challenge. The headlines may tell only negative stories about Surrey, but we don't have to. Please, allow us to reintroduce ourselves.